Topic of my talk today is the readiness of R&D and capacity building. Now, I recall that at the end of 2021, I was giving a speech at COP27 on green hydrogen, and I then said that I had worked for Sasol during the oil exploration in Namibia, and I was also funded for my PhD by Schlumberger. And I was always wondering, when will it come full circle, and why was I being funded by an oil company? And so it seems as if here we are. So I want to give you a brief overview over what does the NCRST do. Now, the Research, Science and Technology Act number 23 of 2004 established the National Commission on Research, Science and Technology, as well as a National Research, Science and Technology Fund. So NCRST was then, it opened its offices in 2014 and has been operating since then. Now, the Act is giving the mandate of coordination, promotion, and development of research, science, technology, and innovation as the core mandate to NCRST. Now, of course, we're also the national funding agency. In other words, we have to make sure we get enough money to distribute throughout the Namibian nation to be able to take up particular research, science, technology, or innovation projects and challenges. We're also responsible for national facilities in all of those ones. I will shorten it and just say research. For national R&D facilities, for instance, we don't run them, but we have to commission them. We have to make sure that they're funded. We have to make sure that the researchers in those facilities are also adequately funded. Then we're also responsible for the data that is coming from this. For instance, we are responsible for the National Innovation Survey. We're responsible for the National R&D data of Namibia. We're responsible for just many, many things. You'll see on the slide next. We're also responsible under that Act for the establishment of various councils. We have, for instance, currently the Biosafety Council. We are in the process of appointment for the Space Council. Then we also have next year the Indigenous Knowledge Systems Council that will be appointed. But one important thing that also has a lot of bearing today is the development of the National Program on Research, Science, Technology and Innovation. That's the National Research Agenda for Namibia. That is defined within the Act as our mandate, and it also says we have to be inclusive. But we define the national research priorities, and the Act says 3 to 5 years. So we actually work with now the kickoff of the NDP6. We're looking at the gaps that was done during the Vision 2030 gap analysis. Then we're looking, of course, at all of the other national documents, and we are doing consultations throughout Namibia. And this is actually in its final stages. We will have more focused consultations, and we will also have validation. Now, the National Research Agenda, you can imagine now what is happening currently. What are the priorities for Namibia? First, we had green hydrogen, and now we have oil and gas. So oil and gas is definitely one of the priority areas for R&D for the next, the development under this agenda. So here you can see, for instance, some of the activities and initiatives. This is not an exhaustive list, but this is basically what NCRST does and is doing. We also ensure the research infrastructure in the country is well maintained and adequate. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the national program, because this is, as I said, where we are defining what are the research priorities for the next 5 years for Namibia, especially on oil and gas. Now, the local content development plan, I've noticed that NCRST, for instance, was either omitted or put under research institute and academia. We're not a research institute. We do run the National GMO, Genetically Modified Organisms, lab under the Biosafety Act and that Biosafety Council, but we are not an institute with researchers who are within the NCRST. The researchers are out there in the various institutions, and we have registered 67 research institutions in Namibia that is tasked with doing the research. So those, as well as from private sector, as well as from government or communities who want to do innovation projects, research, etc., we are responsible for ensuring that we do fund them. One important issue to also remember, or that I should bring up, is that the National Research, Science and Technology Fund, that's supposed to fund all of the researchers, does not have an R&D levy specified like with other funds, which means that we essentially, in the Act, we're relying on government for government subsidies. Subsidies, thus far, is only enough for salaries and utilities. What it forces us to do is essentially to fundraise internationally and nationally for our research priorities. Ladies and gentlemen, it can't be the case for Namibia. If we want to determine our own priorities, what we fund, who we fund, what problems we want to address in our society, it needs to come from us. So this is one of the things where we really need to look at the R&D levy. We can look at it from the oil and gas sector, we can look at it from other critical sectors that we do bring it in within some amendments to that particular act. Now, we have already a draft program that is in circulation currently for consultation on oil and gas. So that's what we had included. We had, for instance, specialists who were writing the components on oil and gas. And in general, it outlines research and interventions to be undertaken. Now, after this session, I'm sure that we will be receiving a lot of emails on experts within this room who would like to review that and who would like to add some more input to it. Then what it also does, it outlines research calls. A research call is then basically what we design and we send out and we say, we would like to have research done within this particular area or answering these research questions. With that, then normally you get funded calls. As I said, we do get funding from international donors and agencies, and because we're a research council, we belong to the global research councils. We also belong to the African Science Granting Councils, and that is also where we get our money from to actually fund research. We have to ensure that within those calls that we address the research infrastructure that the researcher would need. Sometimes that could even be that they need to set up a research lab. Sometimes it could be that we define that we need a center of excellence in research or a national research center. Then we can also fund chairs within such a research call. And this is actually a very good opportunity to ensure that our research needs are met. In other words, imagine we put a research chair in oil and gas, focusing on particular research questions at UNAM, and another one at NAST. And what that research chair has, normally research chairs have about 80 to 100% of their time should be spent on research. And we fund then the postdocs that they need, we fund the PhD students, we fund the master students. We also provide seed funding for their equipment, for their conferences they need to go to, for their data collection, etc., for a period of 3 to 5 years. And then another thing that we're also looking at is very specialized, like it is synthetic fuels as well as hydrogen, and it is capital intensive. And we've just heard that we have to ensure that whatever training we are offering, whatever skills we are offering and acquiring, has to conform to certain standards and certifications. So it is very important that we adhere to this. Not only should the trainees ensure that whatever training that they're getting is certified and adhering to global standards, but our trainers currently at VTCs, our professors at universities, etc., they also need to be certified. And of course, we have to ensure that whatever equipment we are using and training on is also certified. In Namibia, in our R&D survey, the latest one, it stipulates that we have less than 3,000 full-time researchers in the country. We have only 67 registered research institutes. Do you see that we need to rapidly increase that capacity, number one, but number two, what we also need to do is that coordination and collaboration across institutions is really key. And this is where the consortia is so important. What it also means, because of that number that we have in the country, we also have to ensure that we conclude international agreements. In other words, we need to have knowledge transfer and exchange and knowledge sharing. So international expertise is also needed. I do agree with the local content plan presenter who said that we have to ensure that that knowledge transfer actually does take place, and that we do make sure that we build the necessary skills and maintain them and retain them, by the way, in the country, so that we don't have a brain drain, but we could have a brain circulation. We've seen now with initiatives under green hydrogen, a number of Namibians are being also trained abroad, but then they circulate back into pilot projects, etc. For oil and gas, it can be the same. Of course, we also need specialized academies and national research facilities. And there's a multiplicity of areas to be covered. So we need to develop a strategy and a master plan to 2030 and beyond. For what skills do we need, for instance, in the initial phases, then in the secondary phases, etc. So I'm basically done. That was what I had to tell you, that the take-home message is collaboration, international and national, is key for Namibia, and that will unlock our oil and gas sector. Thank you so much.